Hello everyone, my name is Cody Beinert, and today I'm going to be discussing my thoughts on the latest record from Victory Over the Sun titled Dance You Monster to My Soft Song. I know, this review is coming out around 3 or so months after the album's release, and look, I wasn't fully aware of this album around the time it came out, and also ever since I listened to it, it needed a few listens for me to fully digest and appreciate it. But whatever. Better late than never, I suppose, because I do believe, honestly, that this might be one of the greatest metal records I have heard this year so far. Victory Over the Sun is a project that is primarily comprised of trans woman Vivian Tylinska. And this extra article, I think, very effectively words what she is doing for, and I quote directly, alongside artists like Liturgy, Black Dresses, and Uboa, she's become a part of an increasing wave of oft-queer and trans musicians reshaping metal, noise, and dissonance into their own image in defiance of the genre's conventions. This same extra article also states that she played tuba and trombone in orchestras and spent her teenage years immersed in classical music and progressive metal like Between the Buried and Me. And judging from what I have heard from this record in particular, this album really does feel like it was created by someone with an immense amount of knowledge and passion for complex and challenging and sophisticated music with lengthy pieces. This record takes on a very interesting kind of style of avant-garde black metal with a lot of very weird kind of mixtures of genres, from post-black metal to jazz, as well as little bits of noise and sludge metal. And look, don't get me wrong, this year has been filled to the brim with some thoroughly impressive and adventurous and unique post and progressive and avant-garde black metal records, such as the latest albums from Fantifaxith, Liturgy, Dod Heimsgard, Botanist, Dawn of Ouroboros, Enslaved, Entropia, Krallis, and I think there's a few more that I'm not thinking of at the moment. But from what I have heard from this particular year, I am fairly confident that this might be my favorite that I have heard. Despite how weird and challenging this thing can get, this record I find is actually surprisingly pretty accessible for the standards of avant-garde black metal, for there is a very tasteful and thoughtful balance of darkness and light, as well as dissonance and melodicism, and tension and release. All of these things that I am talking about can all be found in the absolutely mammoth opener of a track, Thorn Woos the Wound, which is a 16.5-minute incredible opus filled with twists and turns and weird, unpredictable ideas that are all very beautifully melded together with the sophistication and the compositional maturity that you would expect from, say, a classical piece from maybe a composer like Bedrix Montana. There's lots of very beautiful melodies, and as well as very dark, dissonant, and brutal guitar work, as well as vicious shrieks, as well as some very lovely, glistening kind of post-rock and math rock passages that help to serve as like the piece's outro, ending things on a very kind of lovely and bittersweet note. Following the record's lengthiest piece, we then have the record's shortest piece, titled Wheel, which takes on a very interesting kind of mixture of like blackened sludge with like these very tense, ominous noise textures that kind of bring to mind something like Uboa or Prurience. And sure, maybe this piece doesn't really quite reach the same level of ear-piercing brutality as either of those two artists. This usage of noise elements really helps to give things a very tense and anguished atmosphere that is further accented by Vivian's very tortured vocals. And the song goes through a very chilling and very slow kind of build before culminating in this like big peak of terror towards the very end. And despite this piece being literally a quarter of the length of the song that comes before it, it feels just as well developed and well written in its own way. After this, we have The Gold of Having Nothing, which is one of the more bright and melodic tracks on the album, as well as one of the more kind of instrumentally lush in terms of its sound palette. For there's a lot of really cool guest musicians providing additional guitars and trumpet and tenor sax, all kind of harmonizing with each other to create this kind of sense of melody as well as groove that wouldn't be out of place on, say, like a Steve Reich piece, mixed in with, the blast beats and the wretched shrieks that you would expect from black metal. Then we have Madeline Becoming Judy, which is characterized by these very kind of glistening synthesizers to give things this kind of airy and lush atmosphere, as well as Vivian's just masterful sense of, tension and release that I have described earlier. There are moments of dissonance and very nonsensical, kind of random sounding rhythms and grooves that then resolve with some very beautiful melodies and also more easy to follow along rhythms and grooves. Towards the very end of this piece, we have what is probably the most euphoric and triumphant moment that the album ever has. That is then followed up by this very lovely kind of bittersweet ambient post-rock outro. And this in itself kind of causes the piece to potentially make sense as a closer for the record. But no, Vivian after this then just drags the listener back down to hell with the actual closer, Black Heralds, which is the most patience-testing and strange and dark and harrowing piece on this whole album. Kind of taking the dissonant soundscapes of Wheel and expanding on that to create this large, fully developed 11-minute piece. There are these kind of strange, doomy moments of kind of rising and falling volume, mixed in with some interesting usage of bass clarinet, to result in something that feels simultaneously like it could have come out of like a Lingua Ignota album or like a Sun O record, like Monoliths and Dimensions. And this sense of tension that these parts of the song bring last for like a very long time, like around 4 to 5 minutes, before finally around like the 9.5 minute mark we get a really brutal release with some really vicious riffs and blast beats and vocals, before the whole album ends with the instrumentation suddenly cutting out as Vivian screams the words "I don't know" into what sounds like the void, ending the record on an incredibly chilling and dramatic note that feels all the more impactful after all of the tension that leads up to this moment. And so, yeah, I have really not that many, if any, complaints related to this record at all, honestly. Everything is so diverse, yet also so beautifully brought together thanks to an incredible attention to detail in the compositions. And everything feels all the more evocative and powerful thanks to some fantastic production that sounds simultaneously both organic as well as incredibly big and punchy. I guess if there's maybe any semi-nitpick I guess I have is that maybe I do kind of wish there was maybe a little bit more variation in like the vocal styles, I guess. Ultimately, that doesn't bother me at all, especially since these black metal style vocals are very well performed and often have a lot of emotion to them to mostly make up for that, in my opinion. If you love metal that is weird, crazy, and experimental, this is definitely not an album that you should sleep on. For this is my personal favorite avant-garde black metal album of the year, as well as, in my opinion, one of the most beautifully crafted and most intelligent metal albums that I think I have heard this decade so far. I am heavily looking forward to whatever the hell this underdog of an artist comes up with next. And so yeah, those are my thoughts on the latest record from Victory Over the Sun. So of course, please let me know in the comments down below. What do you think of this album? Do you think it is worth the hype and the praise that I am giving it? And of course, please feel free to like and subscribe and comment. And I will see you guys next time.